All right. Chris, wait a second. Am I
Muzan, you got it. You were gonna get it. I know.
that random you in there? Muzan. All right. All right. It's Chris Muzan. We should start again, Chris. That's not
No, no. You gotta keep the off.
gotta
No,
keep
keep
going.
it authentic. Keep it authentic. It's
All
all
right, keep
good.
it authentic. All right. I should have, the problem, if I burned the Palo Santo before I introduced you,
That was it.
all would have worked out.
It all
And we're
worked out.
still going to do that. That's going to be our little ritual, burning Palo Santo before we talk, because it's called holy wood and it helps clear the air. Yeah, I wish you could smell it. It's really good. Here you go.
There we go. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Woo!
Ooh, okay.
Stuff. It's good
Clear,
stuff.
clear the air.
Right, yep, clear the air, honest conversations. All righty. So this is our second installment on the Rose Compass about money, financial planning, thinking about money. And it's the perfect time because it's January 2nd. So everybody is starting to think about what are their plans for the new year, what kinds of financial investments might they make, how much do they want to make for the year, especially small business owners and entrepreneurs are sort of setting goals, trying to figure out how to achieve those goals. So we're going to talk about some practical tips from Mr. Financial Literacy, Chris.
Thank you, Jenna. By the way, I appreciate these conversations a bunch, right? Like we need to have these a lot more because I think they help people.
I think they do too, for sure.
Yeah.
So just like before, I want to start with a root word, success, because my thinking of this conversation is really about financial success for 2020.
Okay.
And so the root word for success comes from the 16th century Latin. You have some people around you, Chris.
Can you hear that?
I can. It's not such a quiet pod in that red world
It's
you're in.
ridiculous. They lie. There's a sign. I'm going to show you a sign that says, these are soundproof pods.
Well, I can hear.
Well, you heard that.
Tell
Well,
them to quiet down. Tell them we're doing something very important.
they just left. So
Good.
I think we'll be good.
Good. Okay.
And we're not cutting that out either. We're going to keep rolling.
We're going. We're
That's
live.
it. We're live. That's right.
Success, 16th century Latin. So it means succeedere. I have to look up how to say these things. So it means come close after, which I'm like, all right, kind of, I get it. And then it evolved into the word successus, which means to advance, a good result, or a happy outcome. So we tend to think of success as like this really big goal, like this huge thing, as though you're climbing a mountain and then you're going to get there and everything's good forever.
Right.
And that's not really what the root word means. It just means that, it's almost like little success here, little success there, right? Happy outcome, happy outcome, happy outcome. That's really life, right? It's not
That's
about.
it. It's not about it's not always about, the thing down the road, right? The big thing. It's about, like you said, little things here and there that you say, that's a win, right? That was a success. Like I worked on that. So
yeah. So, okay. So I think that's something for people to think about in terms of like, what would it take to be successful in 2020? And we're all thinking about finances all the time because it's sort of, how we manage our lifestyles.
sure.
So here's what I am wondering in terms of success, right? So would somebody who's an entrepreneur or small business owner, and obviously this could relate to anybody, but is setting an amount, sort of starting out your year and saying, I want to earn this dollar amount for the year. Is that like a healthy or intelligent sort of goal for a person to, or should they be thinking more about other sorts of goals and letting the money come as it comes?
It's a really good question. And I know, Jenna, a lot of people struggle with it. I would say, and I'm going to give you a lot of these type of answers because this is the best part about money is that there's no right or wrong, right? There's no one size fits all. And that is kind of also where we go wrong because we think there's a one size fits all. But I say it comes down to the person. Here's what I'll tell you. I know people that money motivates them. They are money motivated. They are cash flow motivated. Like that's what does it for them. So if that's their nature and they understand that when they get that $5,000 thing, like that check or whatever, it just, they keep going, then that's a great goal for them. That's an amazing goal, right? But the other side of that are people that aren't money motivated, which is a lot of us, right? We're not money motivated. This is where those sayings come in that like money isn't everything. Those are the people that just aren't money motivated. So they do need to have a more intrinsic, a bigger goal that maybe takes care of, one of their 6 basic human needs. It gives them significance. It gives them a way to contribute or feel love, right? Like those become successes and big goals And normally, the most successful people, we're talking entrepreneurs, business owners, the most successful, that's the way they go.
Yeah.
Their purpose is bigger than the money. They
Right.
just happen to choose a game or a sport or an industry that is actually like it fits them. They're good at it. They become the best at it. And then people pay you for what you do, right? That's the world of entrepreneurship. If you can add value to another person, to the world, the bigger the problem you solve, the more money you're going to make.
Yeah.
So people that are money motivated, sure, put that, hey, I want to make $250,000 this year, income, or I want to have a 7-figure revenue business this year. Sure, if that's how you roll. But the other side is, if you don't feel pressured to put that as a goal. Make sure you look deeper into like what actually makes you go, and the money then will come. But
Yeah.
you gotta know who you are.
Right, right. I love that. And one of the other things you mentioned in our first conversation that I reflected on earlier today is about this question of, you know, being an entrepreneur is sort of a new endeavor for me. I've tried a lot of different things. And one of the things I'm noticing about this entrepreneurial spirit that you've sort of expressed is the kind of bravery and bold action that it takes, and that it's action oriented, as you said before. So it's not about, I come from an academic background, and where you learn and you study and then you produce. And your point is that an entrepreneur is somebody who is making decisions and making decisive actions, and then things start to materialize and there's learning happening all around. And so there's something that's more fluid and flowing about the entrepreneurial mindset, which I find really intriguing.
Yeah.
And I think it really ties into the question of faith too. I was thinking about this in the shower because I was surrounded by water. That, we think about the idea of faith, or like, trust that things are going to align for us and work out for us. And a lot of people, I think, are definitely in that mindset now, thinking about their year and what they might want to accomplish and what might come down the pike. And there's something about taking a step and having, all these sort of spiritual teachers say these things, the road rises up to meet you or whatever. And I was thinking about the concept of walking on water, because to some degree, being an entrepreneur and stepping into new territory requires you to step on a place that is not firm.
Absolutely.
And you have to sort of find your way and trust that you're going to keep walking, that it's going to keep rising to meet you. So that's something Absolutely. That I think is really fascinating.
It's important. It's important. And that's the root, right? If we want to get into this, the spiritual talk, like, as a Christian, it says in the Bible, faith without works is dead. Faith without works is dead. Meaning you can't just have faith and be like, oh, it's all going to make it happen. No, you have to work. You have to actually do something. You actually have to put that foot forward. The analogy, or the picture of the entrepreneur, I think I heard Steve Harvey, or, this is common, but Steve Harvey, I think, was one of the first people that said it. Like, it's about jumping off of that cliff and building your parachute on the way down, or building your plane on the way down. Right? Wow. School takes us the other way. It says, let's build this plane while we're up here, while we're safe, while we're secure, right? Have a job, go through school, like, let's build it. And then hopefully it flies.
Yeah.
It's not, the entrepreneur is like, man, I really want to fly. I'm standing at the edge of this cliff. Let's go. And that's where that courage comes in. And that's where the boldness comes in. And you have to know that and this is where your faith comes in, because you're going to get bruised. You're going to, as Steve Harvey said, you're going to hit the branches on the way down. You're going to hit the rocks on the way down. Like, you're going to. But if you continue to build and know that you're doing the work, you're going to start to fly. Right. Most people are too scared to take that step and leap off.
I know.
I heard, I use this saying a bunch for people, right? Like, we've heard this, and this will be good. We've all heard the saying, it takes money to make money, right?
Yeah.
It's not true, right? It takes courage to make money.
Oh, I love that line. That needs to be a bumper sticker. I'm writing this down as you say it, because one day it's going to be in a book, and I'm going to write your book. Go ahead.
And I probably stole that from somebody. I probably heard it at some point. You know what I mean? But in general, that's actually the case. Because think about it. Like, people that come to this country, or people that migrate, like immigrants, they don't come here with money. They don't. Like, they don't have it. They come here with courage to be like, we're going to start something because where we just left was way worse than what's here. So we're just going to come here and build. And we're going to do what we need to do. We're not going to spend money on a bunch of crazy stuff. We're not going to be entitled because we're not from this country. We're going to have courage to be like, we're going to figure this out on a brand new soil, brand new land.
Yeah.
That's why that immigrant mentality, like people that really come from something different than where we're at, think about life and business and all this stuff differently. We grew up with that saying, it takes money to make money. And people think that that's really the case. Like, no, like you just got to have courage. You got to know that other people have money. You got to have an idea. You got to be willing to put yourself out there, get uncomfortable, change your habits, right? All these things that actually are just the most courageous things to do. That's why people don't win in entrepreneurship. It's because they lack the courage or the faith, right? And so when I say things like in my life, it's faith, family, business, in that order, I know what my actual foundation is. Because if I fix the inside, right, if I fix my spiritual life, if I fix how I feel about myself and that, then I get the courage to be able to take that step when I don't see the full path, when I, am down on myself or, disappointed in myself or not encouraged, any of those things. Those are real human, right? Like feelings. We have to address them. And all that ties back into, right, our lack of money sometimes. If we're not addressing those things, it's going to be scary. It's going to be scary.
Yeah. I love that. I love all those things that you just said. And one follow-up question though is, I've often in my life had worries surrounding money. I mean, so much of our relationship with money has a lot to do with how we grow up and the messages we've been taught. And we don't always look at the deeper lesson that money is teaching us, because if you're influenced by society and you want security and you want, a sense of rootedness, then you're just grasping oftentimes, and you're not really understanding the way it flows. And so and not everybody teaches us. I mean, you are kind of really in depth expressing some of that stuff, but not everybody is really out there teaching that, especially in schools, as you were talking about.
And I'll tell you, many people aren't open to it. It's the same reason people don't go to therapy. It's the same reason people don't get to their core issues. It's because it's hard. It's tough to really go back and assess, like, how did I get here? Why do I feel this way about this thing or that thing? Right? Like, we don't want to do that work.
Right.
We don't want to. It's uncomfortable. Again, this is a game of being uncomfortable. And I tell people this in their financial life too, because when I sit down with a lot of people and we go through that financial planning talk or whatever the case is, I'll ask, like, hey, what's the goal? Like, what are you guys trying to get to? Jenna, you probably know, probably 90%, 9 out of 10 people at some point say the word comfort. I just want to be comfortable. That's what they say out of their mouth, which I just put an article out on LinkedIn about, like, our financial language, right? Like, these are things that people say that they don't understand is the reason why they're not going to get to where they want to be. The only way to get to comfort is to be extremely uncomfortable for a long period of time. That's literally it.
So
but
true.
we seek comfort so much because we say it to ourselves and we think everything's about comfort. And it's literally the reason why we don't achieve what we want to achieve. We have to go through that process. And this comes down to our money, our language, how we talk about it. It's all tied in. And again, people don't want to do this work. Yes, you're right. Not a lot of people are talking about it also. But even when we do, there's a select few that want to do the work because it's hard.
Right. It is hard. And I love that you have said that, because so I'm also a yoga teacher and I've studied yoga for many years. And the business I'm starting, which is intimacy coaching, is really founded in yoga and meditation, because to me, I'm really interested in the way people think about their bodies and the shame that often people carry about that and how to kind of release that. So that's a side comment. But what you're saying about the entrepreneurial spirit of being uncomfortable and getting used to that experience of being uncomfortable is very much the foundation of my yoga training as well, which is, you get yourself into a position, on a physical level, right? In yoga, you're moving into a position where you're like, this is awkward and weird and I have to breathe here. And then based on what you're doing on that mat in those different physical positions, you're teaching your body how to breathe through discomfort. Wow. And how to stay calm through discomfort. And that's really like, that's about being present, right? And sort of starting to acknowledge what's real and what really does exist. Which is that, you know, and Pema Chodron, who's a Buddhist monk, says, you know, this essential reality is that there's groundlessness in our lives, that, you know, we want a firm ground, firm footing, but that's really not the reality, because we're not in control and we don't know what's going to happen. But so many people are grasping in the effort to gain control. And yet there has to be balance too, right? Because you need to feel some level of safety and security to function in life.
And it's a high priority for people, right? It's
Yeah.
a high priority. Certainty, uncertainty, significance,
Yeah.
all those things, right? It's a high priority, but how it manifests in people's life has to deal with what work they're willing to put in, right, to get to that place.
So speaking of that, kind of wrestling with, you know, the unknown and what might be confusing about, I'm going to take this step, I don't know how it's going to go, and our human desire for safety and security, you know, how do we achieve a balance? Like for you, how do you, you know, you can speak for yourself,
Sure.
how do you find a balance in those areas as an entrepreneur?
So you'll hear a lot of entrepreneurs say this: there's no such thing as balance, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, because balance, right? Balance actually means like you have to give one way to get the other thing, right? Like there's always this weight of like, hey, well, if I want to be successful, I can't do this. If I want this side, I can't do this. That's actually not life. Life is about harmony, right? It's about your priorities and how much of whatever you're doing do you want to actually do. It's about harmony. There are seasons in our life, right? Like as an entrepreneur, I'll tell you,
Yeah.
there's times that I'll work 90 hours that week and not see my family at all. And then there's another time that it's more important to be with my family, and I will spend 60 hours a week with my family, right? Like I'll figure it out at that time
Right.
of whatever's important, but it's not balanced. Like life is very unbalanced, right? Because you don't know what's hitting you. You don't know what's coming. As an entrepreneur, you're always just moving and ready. It's kind of like when you work out and you know those balls, those like flat ball, those balance balls, those things,
Yeah.
like it's constant unsteadiness. Like you never really have balance. You're always just kind of like reacting to what's happening. And that's how life is. So again, this goes back to like people wanting to have comfort. People
Yeah.
want this perfect balance. Like my family life's great, my spiritual life is great, my money is great, like, and it's all at even proportion and everything's wonderful. And that's just, it's not realistic. And we're
Well,
so,
and if you have it, oftentimes you feel dead inside. So what you're
mm,
speaking,
oh, I got a good one for that one. That's, it's
okay.
funny because like again, I hear all these things. They say, right, if you're in the hospital, right, and you're tied up to a machine, you want to see the lines going up and down. If you flatline, you're dead. So that's life, right? If you want everything to be flatlined, you're not living. You're dying. Life is like this. It's like that heart monitor, that thing in the hospital, that like it's just constant up and down. And so by you saying dying, right, that's 100% true. 100% true.
Well, and that's also in the spiritual traditions that I study as well. You know, Buddhism and the wisdom tradition of Christianity talks about that. And, you know, inherent
Yeah.
in Christianity is that idea of the death and the revival, right? And
Yeah.
that's really a recurring thing. It doesn't have to, you know, if you look at it as a
Sure.
story, it's constantly a death of some sort and a revival of another part of you and becoming new all the time. And that is what it means to really be alive. But that's why I love what you're saying, because you're secretly a yogi. You didn't know that, Chris. Like,
I didn't know that.
but yeah, I think so. So just from my own experience, I worked at a job that was very kind of, how do you, stable. Let's call it that, stable, right? And so this was a place that it was very much about, you had these hours each day, you had a lunch break at this time, everything, you knew what to expect in every way, and every day sort of looked the same surroundings, all those things. For a lot of people, they really like that and they find a lot of comfort there, and that works for them. And so I'm not judging that works for people. I thought that would work for me. I thought that was something I would like, because I've been a teacher for a long time, but I was like, I really want to try the business world. I want to see what it's like to work in an organization, a bigger organization, you know.
Sure.
Got my cubicle with my poetry and my pictures of the Grand Canyon, you know. I'm like, oh, this is my little space. And what I learned was that rote mechanistic way of living was killing me inside. It was killing me inside. And I couldn't understand why that was happening when all the people around me seemed totally fine with it. And I would start to talk to people because I was having all kinds of like existential crises during that time of
Sure.
like, is this really what life is? This is how it works. I only live at 6 o'clock when I get home. Like that's life. And this is all just what I have to do so I can live later. Is that really what existence is about? And I was doing it for money. I mean, I was predominantly, the whole focus was I needed to make money. And my mind was so narrow in my thinking that you couldn't make money any other way. You had to do it this way.
Mhm.
And it was killing my soul. It was killing my spirit. And everybody else was just like, what's the big deal? Why don't you just, do what you have to do. And then you get to go home and you're free. And it was like, I want to be free all the
All
time,
the time. Absolutely.
and why would I stay somewhere where my gifts are just not, I have all these freaking gifts. I'm like a treasure chest of all this stuff. And I just have to like hold it really tight. I'm like in a straitjacket. So that kind of goes to a little bit of what I think you were saying about, that ups and downs are sort of more natural and we need to accept that. Now, some people live that life and they love what they're doing. And so there are the ups and downs. There is the feeling alive and stuff. But it sounds like, because you deal a lot with entrepreneurs or maybe small business people, I don't know
Right.
specifically, you can say that in a minute, but that people are willing to be a little bolder and more courageous, and they get used to that experience. And there is a feeling of being more alive,
Absolutely.
perhaps.
A
Yeah.
hundred percent, 100%. And, it's the difference between, and here's the thing, people might hear me, get on my high horse or rant about entrepreneurship, but to each his own, right? Like, remember, we come from a place, like I went to college. I ran the system. I went to school, got good grades, right? Went to college, got 2 degrees, came out, worked in my field, 10 years. Like I did it. I did the thing that everybody said. But
Yeah.
then just like it happened with you, there was something else missing. There was something missing when you really take a look and you're like, is this it? Right? I come from restaurants. So it was long nights, holidays, weekends, overworked and underpaid. Like I was like, is this it? Like I'm gonna do this for the next 20, or I'm gonna go open up a restaurant? Like what's the move? That takes a certain type of person. Here's the thing. I think a lot of people have that thought. I just think the next step, which is what am I going to do about it?
Mhm.
Because they surround themselves with those people at the job, that becomes that crab in a barrel mentality of like, well, my aunt says I got a good job, or my friend says that's okay. And then they start to justify, at least I get weekends off. Well, at least I'm not doing this. Well, at least, and that's gets us to this place of complacency where we stop asking ourselves those tough questions of
Yeah.
like, what is life? What am I trying to give? What am I trying to do? And we settle in and just kind of lock in to whatever, right, that nature is at that time. So it takes a different type of person. I just want people that are having that self-talk with them, like this isn't it, and they know it, to start to figure out how to get the courage to do it, because that's where it starts. It starts with the courage of like, all right, what do I need to change? Like, what am I looking for? And then you start to think. When your brain goes to work thinking, like it actually works, right? But we live in a society where everything is distraction or mind numbing or escapism, right? It's why people hate social media, because that's all it is. Like you actually get in a trance by just
Yeah.
scrolling and your brain stops working, right?
Yeah.
It's a real thing that's happening. If we can get people back to the asking themselves questions, figuring out like, hey, why don't I like this? What do I like? What am I good at? Where do I want to go? What does my life look like 15 years from now? What impact do I want to have? Am I just here? When you really start to sit down and ask yourself those questions and not numb it out with anything, right? Anything that we would numb ourselves with. If you don't do that, you'll get to a place where you figure yourself out and then you start to make moves.
Yeah. How did you learn all of this, Chris? I mean, you're speaking about this pretty eloquently, and I know I have some other questions for you that are about practical advice for people because I know they're going to want that at this point in the year. But how did you start to uncover these things at such a young age? A lot of people it takes a lot longer, and I'm not sure how old you are, but I won't ask.
34. I'm
Oh,
34. I started this when I was 27. I got into entrepreneurship at 27, 26, 27, right? Because I told you I lived the actual like go to
yeah,
school, get good grades. Like I did that thing, right? The blessing is, and this is why I love what I do. I was introduced to a company that helped me see some of these things. The
yeah,
company I'm with right now, World Financial Group, right? Like it introduced these things to me when
yeah,
I didn't understand them at the time. Now, the best thing is I already had that seed in me, because that's when I was already in restaurants, and I was like, there's got to be something. There's
Yeah.
something I'm missing. And then and this is how God works, right? Like, then my answer came.
Right.
Right? It came in the form of a business that had mentors and coaches and people that were already successful financially in their marriage, in life, like 30 years out, right? I always tell people, you have to find people 20 years your senior, 30 years your senior, and get their wisdom. I got introduced to that at 27 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Those formative type of years for me. I had just gotten married 2 years before, right? Like we're figuring all this stuff out. I got introduced to the information. Then I took it upon myself to be like, all right, I get it. And I'll tell people this every time: personal development, like actually getting in and reading books every single day. Like I went extreme. This is because this is my level of commitment to what I saw, I thought I wanted. I stopped watching TV. I cut off the radio. I didn't do anything but read and consume those things of success. Someone once told me that your money will only grow to the degree that you do as a person.
Wow.
Right? Your money will only grow to the degree that you do as a person.
But people can find flaws in that. I love that belief and that idea. But, then you can look at people who have a ton of money who are not good people. And I'm not going to name any names, but they might get really powerful positions and they're like not the great people.
Here's
How do
what
you
you gotta
explain
understand.
that? Let's unpack that.
Yeah.
How do we in our minds, when we start to understand the flow of money and how it works, how do we put that next to the fact that a lot of people who have a lot of money are not very generous?
And I would ask you, right, just to that point,
Yeah.
can you know these people personally? Have you spent time with them? Do you really know that they're not good people? Like, how well do you know another wealthy person? See, that's the difference. I sat in these rooms with people that have $40 million net worths, $100 million net worths, and they are like, you don't understand. I think there's a stat that says like 90% of like the world's charitable donations come from the top 1%.
Okay.
Poor people can't help poor people, right? Like, it's just the way it goes. You need people, and what people don't understand, there's two types. People that inherit money are a small percentage of people that build wealth. To build wealth, for you, Jenna, to take yourself to building wealth, if you didn't come from it, you have to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If like, for me, I'm getting to that place where I'm growing. My wife and I, like, we see it, but our daughter is going to live in a different world. She might inherit some things.
Right.
And we're gonna have to teach her those values. But this is how empires grow, right? Empires grow by doing good, by solving problems, right? Right. And again, back to like this is the way we think about money, right? Money is just a tool. Money is just a tool. It's not positive or negative. Money doesn't make you worse. If you're a good person, you will be a better person with money. If you're already, right, having addressed some of those things in your life and you get money, you will be a worse person with money and eventually lose it. It's the way it goes. Like, these are the actual laws of it. But we have to get away from like how we think about it, like, having a negative stigma of thinking that we know someone's not a great person and they have money, and correlating those two. That has nothing, right? That has nothing to do with anything. I know people that have no money that are horrible people.
Right.
Right? You know what I mean? Like, so it has nothing to do with the money.
Yeah.
But if that horrible, right, again, if that person that wants to then get money has to change who they are in order to get it, otherwise they won't keep it. Right? They won't keep it. It's not something about making the money, right? People that hit the lottery, they get the money, but you can read the statistics. It says like after the first 7 years, like most of them lose all of it, because your money only grows to your identity. What wealthy people know, and I make this analogy often, if you're building wealth, this is your identity, or how you see yourself, or where you come from. Or I tell people, if you've only made $50,000 ever, that's the most you've ever made in 1 year, that's your identity. If I gave you $250,000 tomorrow, you wouldn't know, I think this is right. Like, you wouldn't know. That's your identity. And then this is your money. They kind of go right hand in hand. What most people think is, if I can grow my money, then I'll catch up, right? I'll be a better person. Wrong, right? What wealthy people know is, no, let me grow, let me learn, let me get around wealthy people. This is what I do, right? Like, I didn't have it to start, but I got my knowledge up. I got around the right people. I grew this. So now as my money goes, I keep it. That's the way it goes. It's nothing to do with good people, bad people. It just has to do with growing your identity, growing who you are, what you feel like you're worth. what you feel like you deserve. There's a guy named Ed Milet who also, you know, had an integral part in like kind of my mentorship. He came into our business, or he was in our business. I got a lot of audios and, you know, tapes from him, and now he's doing his social media thing. But he says we only take from life what we feel like we deserve. We
Wow.
only take from life what we actually inside feel like we deserve. When you work harder, and this kind of goes to what we talked about off camera, the more that you start to work and you know you're really putting in the work, sleepless nights, getting punched in the mouth, ups and downs, you start to internally believe, I deserve whatever comes to me.
Yeah.
I deserve this because I've been busting my butt for years. I deserve this. Then you get it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we have to understand how to think about money, how to think about our life. And to answer your question, go back to the beginning, right? Like, that's how I got this eloquent, or, you know, whatever, you know, just, I took in a lot of information. I got around the right people. I read the right books. I got into the right rooms. I wasn't just, you know, trying to figure things out myself, which so many people try to do. Like,
Right.
you need guidance, right? 33% theory. There's a guy, Ty Lopez, who's, you know, on the internet. He talks about this 33% theory, how you should spend your time. 33% of your time should be spent with people on your level, people that have similar goals, you're at a similar spot in life, and you can kind of encourage each other, push each other, right? Have that accountability. You should spend the other 33% of your time with people that are, you know, 5-10 years your junior, so you can pull them up. You have an aspect of mentoring. Once you have information, you're responsible for bringing up the next. And then you spend your other 33% of the time with people 20 to 30 years your senior, so you're getting pulled up, you're getting mentored, you're getting the information. And if you can balance, talk about balance, right? If you can balance those three, you'll actually, right, be well-rounded. You can stay humble. You don't get too high on your supply, right? You can give information. You can learn more. You can pull yourself up. Like, everything comes with our associations. And most people don't get around people that are wealthy. Robert Kiyosaki says, most people aren't rich because they take advice from salespeople and not rich people. It's true, right? And oddly enough, right, I'm in the field where I sell, right, I sell financial products. So I don't take offense to that. It's the truth. But hence why I do this. Hence why I really just want to educate. I want to talk to you about the things that are going on so I can educate you enough, because I got this education from wealthy people.
Yes. I
Right?
love this. Okay. So I have a lot of questions, you know, that you're sort of touching on things. So, you know, I'm thinking, so once you sort of learn some of these lessons from people who have gotten the wealth that they desired and who are working with it and managing it effectively, because that's what a lot of people want. They want some level of wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So once you start learning some of these lessons and you're in the thick of it, now, you know, maybe you're talking to a small business owner or an entrepreneur who's starting out. And so I'm using that as sort of the background for some of the practical tips here, even though we know people who will watch this might not just be starting out. But it seems like you're always a beginner anyway as an entrepreneur.
Always learning.
You're
Always
always
learning.
learning. Yeah. So 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 it sounds like you're saying there might not be a formula. And so I have two questions here.
Okay.
If there is no formula and we're just sort of checking things out, trying things out, seeing what works, trying to be as diligent as we can, also accepting and trusting that something will come in because of the work that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
What are practical tips that someone can take in terms of starting a business to ensure that they are doing their due diligence, right? So if we tackle some of our underlying belief systems about, you know, having a limited mindset, or thinking that money is not going to come to us, and we sort of start tackling those and unpacking those, and now we understand how it flows as a tool when you kind of have a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
How do you then know that you're doing your due diligence in terms of taking steps? Because I guess my question is, how do you know you're not just flinging wildly? Because some people might do that very often. People who are self-employed or freelancing, they might just be like, I just need money. I'll do this. I'll do that. Let me just piece it together. And then they're not breathing. And then there's not a conscious, aligned sort of step forward. It's just spinning.
Yep.
And how do you avoid that trap?
So you asked a lot in there, and some of the stuff, like, we've gone through a bit, but, like, what's the best way to pose this? So as far as that entrepreneur that's just getting started, there's checks and balances, right? There's checks and balances. You always have to have accountability. People think that just because you're an entrepreneur means you don't have to answer to anyone or you don't have to be accountable to everyone. There's always going to be some level of accountability with, someone that you trust, someone that has done what you do or whatever the case is, and you can consult with them, ask them. Some of these people, again, become mentors. They become people that you buy them a lunch or take them to dinner, and you can pick their brain for an hour and a half and say, hey, how did that happen? Hey, when you went through that, what happened? Right? And Tony Robbins always says, success leaves clues. So back to what you said in the beginning, there is a blueprint. There is a blueprint, right? Because success, like these are success principles. There's certain things that will cause you to get success. Our job is to learn and study those things. Hence why school doesn't work for entrepreneurs, because they don't teach you success principles. They teach you how to be a thing or do a thing, but that's actually not going to help you. What you need to do is, and I just tweeted this a couple of days ago too, right? Like, it's equal parts. It's equal parts of learning from people that are successful and learning from people that have failed. And you taking in the information from both of those and consuming that will help you in your decision-making process. We don't have to fail if someone else has failed. We just need to understand how they failed and not make that mistake. On the other side, we need to see how other people succeeded and say, okay, if that's the path, how can I apply that? Does that make sense for my business? What would I do? And as we go down that process, you build your own vision. You build your own, like, okay, that worked for me, that didn't, this doesn't really work with my business, right? Because what happens is, I love consultants, right? Like, but I think we talked about this the last time, like everyone that wants to consult, they're just, right, like they're college people, right? They came from college and they have an MBA or a PhD, then they want to go consult an entrepreneur. And entrepreneurs will tell you, right, like they might consult you right out of business. Right? Because they don't know what you're going through. They don't know. They went through the regular process. The worst thing an entrepreneur can do is take advice from a successful employee or some type of, because it doesn't always go. And too often, because we're confused, we listen to people that really it didn't make sense for what we were trying to do. I've been guilty of it. Right? I've been in that process. Talk about being in a business for 7 years. The early stages, people that have genuine love and respect and care about your well-being, they'll tell you their perspective, their point of view, what they think you should do. Your job is to take the good, leave the bad, process it. Does that work for me? Oh, that makes sense. Should I? And like, you're always doing that because you're your own human being. If we start to get into this following, that's more the employee, right? When you're just being told kind of what to do, that's just, right? That's just employee mindset.
Right.
But
and I like, go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
no, finish.
The reference of what makes sense, I think, is interesting because I'm very much a spiritual thinker and I'm just, that's just my world. And I often think about the kind of concept of rationality versus what works, right? And to some degree, what we think makes sense, it really, we have to unpack that. Absolutely. Because again, if you're looking for, which I think for most people, when they're thinking about money, they're thinking about security. At root. I want security, and obviously there are people who might like, I want this fancy car. I want this kind of house. I want to travel to Rome or whatever, but a lot of people who are trying to acquire wealth, it might be about things, but most people it's like, let me get secure. And there's a question I think about like how rational you have to be and whether what you think makes sense really makes sense in the tangible world, because the people who work for 20 or 30 years somewhere and are miserable with the hope that that retirement is going to be when they get to live, then they die at 55 and are like, oh, there that life went. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. So I think there's something to be said for what makes sense to us, and we have to think about our own perception of reality and rationality, because if you want to be alive and you want to be happy, maybe that's what you think security will provide. Like, if I have enough money, I'll be happy. But there's so many stories and so many examples of people who have a lot of money and aren't necessarily happy, or they get money and then they spend it and then they want more. And so they're really at root not sure who they are and what they want. Exactly. And so what makes sense is, let me go out and make a lot of money. But the why, it sounds like you're sort of keeps coming back to, the why is really significant.
It's how we know who we are. Yeah. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Top need is what? Self-mastery, self-actualization, right? Like, it's knowing who you are. to be able to answer that question for yourself. What am I doing here? What do I really want?
Yeah.
Well, again, that's the root of everything. It's the root
I
of everything.
agree. I totally agree. I love that you're saying this stuff out loud though, because I always say this stuff and to college students, and I think they're just like, whatever. I mean,
Oh,
I said to my
absolutely. It
college,
goes over most people's head. Like
yeah,
they don't process this.
they're like, I just want to go and eat a cupcake right now. Don't make me think about that.
Exactly.
You know, I was talking to college students. They were in a writing class back this fall, and I mentioned, you know, we were talking a lot about all kinds of issues that come up in academia, and what's real and what do you want for your life? Because I think oftentimes college students don't get practical skills about how to make life work for them, because
Absolutely.
they're given these stories of what's going to happen, how things are going to look once you get this degree, and then this happens and this happens, and then you're stuck there and you're like, wait, I'm
That
not
didn't happen.
happy, this isn't working for me.
Exactly.
So when I sort of probe that a little bit, I think they get a little touchy, because they're like, don't tell me that, you know,
Too
I want to
uncomfortable.
believe it. Yeah.
Too uncomfortable. And what I say in the beginning of this, right? People don't want to go there. They don't want to go there. It takes, right? This is why. And again, I've learned this stuff by just talking to a bunch of people too, right? Just being in the business where I have to constantly talk to people. Yes, I do, right? Deal with entrepreneurs and small business owners because that's who I associate with. And I know I have a lot of value to help them. But really, like, my clientele in my financial business is like regular people, two dual income household, mom and dad work, they got a kid, right? We always used to say over the age of 25, married homeowners and with kids. That's our market. So I had to learn how they thought about money. It's real experience, right? Like, talk about both sides of this. I got to a place where I was around the high net worth, the people that really did it, and I took information from them. And then I got a chance to get to this other level of, right, the two-parent household that makes $70,000 a year, that live, you know, middle income, middle class, and how they think about money. And they were two completely different things. And I had to learn that. Like, okay, how do you really think about this? Like, what is, and again, that's where it becomes this thing of like, this is what I've been taught. This is what I know. It would be too uncomfortable to unlearn and then relearn something new. It'd be too much. So I'm just going to keep going this path. I'm going to keep putting money into my 401k, and I'm going to keep thinking that if I just buy a house and own a home, that like I'm set. And that's, you know, that's what my dad taught me. That's what my mom taught me. It's my grandma. Like, I might even splurge and get a second property, right? But in general, like, that's most middle income, middle American families' goals is, can I save for retirement? Can I buy a home? After that, that's it. And they never get to the place of asking themselves the question, why am I here? I didn't come here to just buy a house and retire. Like, this isn't life. They don't get to that place. And again, no judgment, teach his own. But one day, right, like, you're not going to be fulfilled. You're not going to be fulfilled.
And the other thing is, no day is guaranteed. I mean, the
Absolutely.
reality underlying when you do that unpacking, and I'm a big meditator, and when you start to unpack, you have no idea how long you're going to live.
Absolutely.
So if you get comfortable with that reality, who does, right? But if you really start to get there, you start to live a lot differently, knowing I could die tomorrow, and am I going to be happy with the way I presented myself in the world and what I taught and what I said and how I behaved?
Yep.
Um,
And unfortunately, the tough part of life is people don't get that until they have a health scare, until someone around them dies, till some tragedy happens. Then they really evaluate, like, what am I doing? Right? It takes that for most people, some type of negative effect in their life, to be like, maybe I should think about it differently. But for people like us, right, it doesn't take a negative tragedy. It takes us connecting and being like, I don't like this. I don't
right.
like this. There's something else.
This
And
is,
then going on search of it.
yeah. So I know we were supposed to talk about practical things. I just want to make one comment before going into, like, at least getting to something a little more practical, but a real conversation. I mean, we
This
can
is,
put up a bullet point list after this.
yeah, this is the most practical. It's just the thing
It
that
is.
people don't want to do, right? Like, people
Yeah,
want the short list. People want if
we
you do,
do.
if you do ABC, you're there. And it's like, no, you got to do the hard work. This conversation you need to have on a daily basis with
Yeah,
people around you in your life that can unpack these things for you so you can get to the next level.
I love it. We're writing a book, you know. When we get off this call, we're going to talk about that. We're writing a
Do
book.
it.
Okay.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
But But here's what I wanted to get into when you were talking about, the dual income, that maybe they're making $70,000 a year or something, and they're just trying to manage and support their kids and do what's right.
Right.
I think a big part of our spiritual traditions, because if for me, I've done a lot of like soul searching, and underneath a lot of our beliefs and our assumptions, we're really founded in this spiritual, this Christian framework. A lot of us, I mean, in America at least, I
Sure.
know that people are all different religions, but the country was sort of founded with that by people who were Christian. And when we look to spiritual teachers, because at root we want to find out how we're supposed to live, and when we get to the spiritual traditions, oftentimes the people who are teaching spirituality and how to live are poor, right? Jesus was poor, or monks, or people are in monasteries. They don't have a lot of money. And so when we want to be a spiritual person, and we want to know what's true and right, and yet those people are not aligned with any sort of financial success, whatever you want
Sure.
to call it, then we get confused, because we're like, well, I don't want to be a nun, or I don't want to be a monk. I'm not going to go live in a cloister somewhere. I need to function in my life. So if I turn to my spiritual tradition and there's not really any practical how to for
Sure.
me, where do I even begin? And then you start listening to the sort of man-made society and those rules, and then you get sort of backwards, because it's not, the teachings aren't coming through. And one of the things that I found is that a lot of entrepreneurs and business coaches
Mhm.
are the ones who are aligning the spiritual and the financial. And they're saying you can actually go together. These things can merge in some way, as long as it's not just about money and things and power,
Of course.
but that they can cohere. What do you think about that?
I agree 100%. Right. And again, as a Christian and a guy that reads the Bible, and I'm not, excuse me, I'm not going to like quote it because I'm not the best at
Yeah.
quoting, and
Yeah.
but if I Google this, and maybe you should for the notes, like it's like money is mentioned in the Bible like 300 something times,
Oh
like
yeah.
a
Big.
lot.
Yeah.
And there's a verse in Ecclesiastes, I don't know it specifically, but it talks about like money, like we need money basically. It's like money is the thing that fixes everything. It says it like in the Bible. So again, this is where religion starts to come in, is because we have someone interpret what it says in the book and take it out of context and feed it to a lot of people. And that maybe isn't how God intended it.
Right.
Right? Like, because there are other, like we can point to other scriptures that it talks about money, right? It talks about the need for it. It talks about, right, the lender or the borrower will always be slave to the lender, right? That's in the Bible. It tells you like you don't want to be a slave so stop like borrowing money from people, right? Like it talks about being good stewards, right? Talk about, I remember you said you're a Quaker, right? Like it talks about being a good steward. Like these are also in the same Bible. They're also in the same exact thing. It's what, again, we taught, do we have to unlearn some things? That old verse of the root, money is the root of all evil, but it really says in there, the love of money is the root of all evil,
Right.
right? It's not actually money, but that's been thrown out of context for years and years and years. But it actually just says the love, because at the end of the day, God doesn't want any other idols, right? He doesn't want you to worship something else outside of him. So, right, like if you put that on the pedestal of your heart, if that's the thing that you want to go get, you are making something else an idol. And that could be, we talk about it in the context of money, but it could be anything that you think takes precedence over your relationship, your spiritual relationship, your relationship with God, right? But again, you have to get into these things, right? You can't just listen to other people. Like I had to read the Bible. I had to like get into it as I got those objections being in the field, right? And trying to, bring people on board and talk about money and all those things. That's where I got to the place of learning. Everyone's not money motivated. I got to that place by talking to a lot of people about making more money or getting to a place of wealth. And they're just like, no. And then they throw all these things at you. And I'm like, yeah, I hear it. But then I went and researched, like, is that true? Like, is what
Yeah.
you're saying? And I went and found out that that's not true. It's not
Yeah.
true at all. And then I have ammo now. The next time someone wants to like say that, I have ammo to be like, that's actually not true. Actually, this is what it says.
Yeah.
But misinformation comes in every form, in every area of our life. We've been misinformed about
Yeah.
so much. And we're, we don't want to do the work to unlearn and relearn.
Right. And it's so easy. It's just so easy to fall into the trap. It's so funny that we're talking about it this way, because I write on my blog every morning. My blog is sort of like my own Quaker ministry. And it's just my fun thing to do. And it's a little wild, but it's fun. And I wrote a post today called God or Money, because even though I'm a very spiritual person and I'm grounded in that, I have financial concerns in my life, and I keep grappling with those things of recognizing that I have to always remember that the underlying purpose is God's will for me. What am I here for, and what's my purpose? The purpose is not making money, right? But it's very easy when we're trying to make money and express a spiritual truth to get confused about, wait, what's the priority here? What am I really doing?
Checks and balances, what I told you about, right? Like there's always has to be checks and balances in your entrepreneurial journey. You can't just leave it up to you and how you think about it, because you'll be confused forever. So you have to check yourself. You have to go down that path where you go really hard on money. I've done it. Really hard on business, and then stop and be like, am I doing everything right? Like, I know I'm making some money, but like, am I? And then you recalibrate, right? That's that harmony.
I like that. So let's end on that question of checks and balances, because I had other questions. Maybe we'll write a little something to sort of follow up with this, because I had some other sort of business questions that I think could be helpful for people. But let's end with the question of checks and balances. So like, how do we at the outset of a business or a venture, whether we're working for another organization or just for ourselves, right? We should always be checking in and having a vision and a plan. What do I want to accomplish? And then, what do those checks and balances look like? Is it like what you're saying, where it's sort of haphazard and you're like, wait, am I doing this right? How do we set something in place to hold ourselves accountable when we do come into those questions of, oh no, I'm getting money hungry now. It's about money and it's not about my purpose. And how do I ensure that I'm really looking for long-term goals of what I want to accomplish in this world, and not just, I need to make 200K right now. So how do we always come back to that checks and balances? What do you think?
So there's a bunch to that, right? Like, I think first and foremost, like, and this is, my faith, you have to have a foundation. For me, the Bible is our foundation. So like, if I get really confused, I go back to the Bible. Like, what does the scripture say about this? What does God say about this? Let me pray about this. Like, is this the right thing? Like, what does he say? He knows my heart. And again, that's the relationship you start to have. It starts spirituality. It starts there, because that becomes foundation. Then the man-made things you can do is, like I said, have accountability partners. Have someone, that 33%, right? Have someone that's running with you, that's running their own business, that's kind of right where you're at. And you're bouncing ideas. You're like, and you figure things out that way. That group of 2 might turn into a group of 4. And you're all going through the same things, but you can balance each other, check each other. Like, yeah, well, is that according to your purpose? Is that this? And now you're getting a little bit of information from people. And the biggest thing is you're figuring it out yourself, right? Like, you're checking in with you. Like, how does this make me feel? Like, do I feel like I'm doing something wrong? Like, is this just my, religious doctrine kicking in? Or do I, like, in my core, feel like this isn't good? That's how you check yourself. It's asking yourself those really tough questions. Right? Like, people do horrible things. Like, people cheat on their spouse and, do all this stuff. At some point you have to ask, like, do I like that? Like, is this
right?
Is this me?
Yeah.
How do I feel about that? Right? Like, you have to be connected enough with your own self to ask yourself those questions.
Yeah.
That becomes those things become checks and balances. The Bible for me, right? But your faith or whatever it is, accountability partners and people that are around that actually can bounce ideas off, people that are 20 years in your industry that you can take some wisdom from. Hey, did you ever deal with this? What was your challenge? Right? And then checking in with yourself. Like, check in. Like, take time to check in. I'm sure that's what, like, your blog does. It gives you time to check in.
It does.
Right?
Yeah.
That becomes a checks and balance.
Yeah, and I really like that. And so what I would end on in terms of my own checks and balance, it's very similar. I also read scripture, but I'm a meditator, and I do that twice a day. And I've done that for years. I've meditated for years, but I mean, that is my lifeblood now. So I don't sit down and watch TV. I don't veg out in front of social media all the time. You know, I do social media for what I need to do there, but
Right.
I don't even read a ton of books the way I used to read a ton of books, because I used to consume books in a way that was almost addictive.
Sure.
But for me, that checking in each day, it just gives me that foundation that I know that I'm going to be calmer. I'm not perfect. And no one who meditates or reads scripture is suddenly perfect and they know all the
Right.
answers. We're human.
That's
But
it.
you need some sort of practice each day that tells you, I'm coming down into this space and this is the root and this is the heart of things. And I'm going to spend time here and let that feed over into the other parts of my day so I know where things are coming from, as opposed to getting in these sort of mind spirals or too much news from the internet, too much information that sets you like
Yeah.
you don't know who you're listening to anymore. You really need to always come back to listening to you
Hmm.
and your connection with the divine. And in me, that is like, that's the gold.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I just had that conversation with another person where, man, I think I'm getting sick. That's what's going on over here. I really do. Like, sorry. But I'll end on this. I was just talking to another guy about that, where I told him, like, information can be a bad thing at a certain point. Too much information that you don't apply, and you start just getting a bunch of conflicting things, will confuse you. So keep moving. This is the entrepreneurs, right? If you're not moving and you're just taking in things, it'll get confusing. But you got to move. You got to go. You got to put some action to it, and then you'll discern that was good information. That applies to me. That doesn't. I don't see it that way now. That's the game. That's the game.
Yep.
So,
I love it. Keep moving. We're end on that. Keep moving.
keep moving. That's right.
All right. Thank you, Chris, so much for this again. And we will
Pleasure's
keep
mine.
talking. We're going to keep having these real conversations.
I'm
And
looking forward to it. I'm fired up
and the
about it.
book and the grand book.
And
we're
the book.
gonna write,
That's
too.
right.
Yeah.
That's
All
right.
right. All right. Thanks everybody for watching. Talk to you later, Chris.